what did we cover this?
Hosea.
Hosea 1 through 3. And what did we talk about at the end? If you remembered everything else, or forgot everything else, remembered one thing, what was the question at the end that I asked you guys? There was a question. What happens in chapter 3?
God tells Hosea to go after Gomer again.
Okay. What does he do to get her back?
Oh, he has to pay the 15
Yes,
shekels
the
of
15
silver.
pieces, I think is how it's phrased.
Yeah.
15, no, you're right, 15 shekels, you're right. 15 shekels of silver, which is the price of a wounded slave under the old law. And what was the question I asked you guys after we read that?
Would we be able to?
Would you go back and buy somebody who had run away and gone off without you if they were adulterers?
Right. And then at the very end, I asked you guys if you were Gomer, too. If you were Gomer, if you had left God, and if you were not Gomer, if you had not left God, vow to never be that person that has to get bought back whenever you were already belonging to the right person in the first place. Right? Okay. This week, we're going to break into chapter 4, which is weird because I know I said we weren't going to go verse by verse, but we are going to go through chapter 4 because it has an application that's very important, I feel, for us today. So we're just going to break right into that. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy or a contention with the inhabitants of the land. All right, so who does God have a contention with? Who's God have a complaint against?
Israel.
Okay, Israel. We're just going to break it down the way they do in the ESV. The inhabitants. Which, as Amanda said, is right. Israel. Okay, we are in chapter 4, starting to go verse by verse. 2 weeks in a row. It's okay. All right. So we need to make a parallel or an application to us as well today in this. So who is spiritual Israel today?
The body of Christ.
The church. Absolutely right. So in Galatians, it tells us that if we are Christ, then we are Abraham's seed. The only ones that can claim to be Christ's is Christians who are in the church. So for us today, we are the figurative inhabitants of the land, the figurative spiritual Israel. Here's what his complaint is. There is no faithfulness or steadfast love and no knowledge of God in the land. We're going to stop there. It keeps going, but we're going to stop for a second. We talked about why God used marriage as a comparison for a covenant relationship with him, right? What is one of the things that you promise, that you vow with everything that you have when you get married? Okay, which we could,
Faithful.
there we go. Faithful is the word I was looking for. You're right. But we're looking for that word faithful because God here says there's no faithfulness. There's no faithfulness. And as Christians, what are we supposed to do in the very most basic sense as a Christian? What is your job?
Have faith.
Okay, that's part of it.
To stay.
That's also part of it. By the very definition of the word, Christian, what are you supposed to do?
To be Christ-like.
Okay, to be like Christ, who is God. So you're supposed to be godly. And part of being godly is being faithful, like you two were saying. Part of that is also steadfast love. No one can ever say that God is not loving. 1 John tells us that God is love. and God is steadfast. So whenever we see that there's no faithfulness and there's no steadfast love, the people of the land have forgotten God. They've forgotten how to be godly, or they just don't care. There's no knowledge of God in the land. If you have a sincere desire to do what God says, but you don't have any knowledge, is there any way you're going to be faithful to God? No. You might try, but you will not do what God says to do. And in doing so, you won't actually be faithful to Him. So knowledge is very, very important. You take any one of these three out of the equation here, and the other two are useless. Okay, if you have knowledge, but you don't have steadfast love, excuse me, or faithfulness, that knowledge is absolutely useless. But if you have the other two, and then you don't have any knowledge, the other two are useless as well. So you have to have all three of these: faithfulness or steadfast love, which are similar to each other, and then you have to have a knowledge of God. Now, God's contention is with these people, Israel, the inhabitants of the land during this time. But let's make a parallel to the church today. If the church is spiritual Israel, what do we not want to be said about us? That there's no faithfulness, there's no steadfast love, and there's no knowledge of God. I'm going to tell you guys that it is shameful how the church in our day and time has squandered all of the things it has at its disposal to become smarter, to have more knowledge. We have phones. There's a phone sitting on the table right here. Thank you for the prop, Anna. If I ask you guys what was the tallest building in the whole wide world, do you guys know what that is? Right, there you go. You can have it in like 10 seconds at the touch of a finger. And I heard somebody make the joke one time. Imagine taking somebody from the 1950s, okay? Even someone from America who was state of the art in the 1950s compared to everybody else. You take someone from the 50s, you put them in a time machine, you transport them to today. And that person is going to wake up out of there, walk out of wherever they're at, and see a guy walking around doing this on his phone, right? Because we do that all the time. We're always doing this on our phones, right? Or this, right? The guy goes, "What is that?" It's a phone. It's a cell phone. Well, what does it do? Well, it has unlimited access, because we have unlimited data, right? It has unlimited access to the compiled knowledge of the entire human race, with a rare few exceptions. The entire knowledge base of humanity is pretty much at your fingertips. Really? Well, what do you do with it? Well, we look at cat videos and we show each other pictures of what we eat. What? Well, what do you mean? Oh yeah, we don't actually use it, we just entertain ourselves with it. And that just shows you, we have something at our disposal, the ability to look up anything we want right at our fingertips. We have Bibles everywhere, guys. I have like a half a dozen in my office. 4 of them never even get cracked open hardly. But I've got them there, right? Do you know what they had to do back in the day? I think it was the 1500s they had to do this. There was a church that had a Bible, and they had to chain it to where they set it to keep it from being stolen because it was so valuable. Okay, pre-printing press days and even post-printing press days in the early days, Bibles were so expensive you couldn't hardly get your hands on a copy. We have them all over the place. I have 5 versions on my phone that I can pull up anytime I want, no matter where I'm at. As long as I got some battery, I can pull it up. I have paper copies everywhere. We have paper copies sitting in pews that never do anything except get turned around because they're folding out of the Bible holder, right? They're everywhere. We have no excuse to not have knowledge. But yet, you can look throughout the church, not here necessarily, but throughout the church as a whole, just pick an average member and their knowledge is what it should not be. I messed that up. It's not what it should be. Because people just don't have the faithfulness and the love of God and the dedication to having the knowledge to make sure that what they're doing is right. We need to make sure that's not us. All right, now this is what is in the land. God said this is what is not in the land. This is what is in the land. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Do you remember what was happening with their kings?
Killing each other.
All right.
Dude, throw
Toward the tail end, they were killing each other to get the throne, and then the people would get mad at that person. They'd shiv them, and here would come another king, over and over and over. Therefore the land mourns, and all who dwell in it languish, and also the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, and even the fish of the sea are taking away. All of that was a result of their continuous sin, their continuous unrepentant sin. All right, but now God is going to add kind of a side note or qualify what he just said. Yet let no one contend, let no one confuse, for with you is my contention, O priest. Now God just said that his contention was with the people of the land. Why is he now saying that his contention is with the priest?
That's their leadership.
I'm going to borrow this for a timer. I don't have my watch. Okay, what?
Because that's their leadership.
Okay, because it's their leadership. The priests were given the duty of offering sacrifices for the people, assisting the people in offering sacrifices, of doing the temple duties, and teaching the law. So whenever he says there's no knowledge base in the people of the land, that boils down in part to the inhabitants of the land. If you really want to know something, is there going to be anything that stops you? No. No, and you're going to find out one way or the other. If you have to go and study the law yourself in the temple at this time, you could have, but they didn't want to. But the contention is with the priest, and here's why. You shall stumble by day, the prophet also shall stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother, talking about Israel. All right, whenever people go out and get drunk, when do they normally do it?
At night.
Okay, at night. Why do people do stuff they normally wouldn't do in the day at night?
So then, like, people can't see him, I guess.
Okay, in part because people don't see you near as much. If I got drunk at noon on a Thursday and walked through 160 and double E down here, how many people are going to see me?
A lot.
A boatload. But if I walk through there drunk at 3 in the morning, how many people are going to see me?
Like none.
Maybe a few. If one car is passing by, a night shift guy's coming home from a late second shift or whatever, maybe one guy's going to see me. But that's it. Nobody else is going to see me. God's going to tell them, you shall stumble by day. All right? They're stumbling already, but everybody's going to see it. Everybody's going to know what's happening. And the prophet with you shall stumble by night. There were a boatload of false prophets. During the time of Jeremiah, a couple of hundred years down the road, whenever Babylon was surrounding Jerusalem and they were going to destroy the city and the people inside, do you know what the prophets were saying? They were false prophets.
I'm reading this right now. There's going to be no destruction and all this
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely. They were saying peace, peace. You know, don't worry about it. And Jeremiah was over there going, no, you need to be worried, okay? They're going to kill us all if you guys don't straighten up. But right here, the false prophets shall stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother Israel. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, okay? And we need to underline that. That's what everybody remembers about Hosea, just about, is my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. We need to make sure that as Christians, as the future of the church, since we are young, we are already members of the church, but we're also the future of the church. 30 years down the road, a lot of people sitting outside are going to be dead and gone. We are going to still be around, hopefully, if we are all healthy enough to make it. But we need to make sure that we are not everybody out there's age going, I don't know enough to do what those people used to do. Or the people that were their age when they were this age knew how to do. We need to make sure that we have the knowledge base to make sure that what we're doing is right. Right? It starts right now. Okay? It doesn't start 10 years down the road. It doesn't start whenever you get out of the house and get on your own. It doesn't start when you get married. It doesn't start when you're 30. It doesn't start whenever you have grandkids. It has to start right now. Or you're going to be scrambling trying to make up time. Have you ever seen a race where the guys, they get out on the track, and they get down and they get all hyped up, and then somebody shoots the gun? Have you ever seen somebody go, I'm going to wait as absolutely long as I can to try to be the fastest one at the end of the race? And they just sit there while everybody else is just running down the track, and they're going, one of these days I'm going to take off. They have handicapped themselves, and even if they manage to finish the race, they're never going to be where they should have been if they would have started when they were supposed to. And it starts right now. That is the point of the studies that we're doing in Hosea and 1 John, is to show you that you are capable of studying the Bible and becoming knowledgeable and being able to get a firm, deep grasp of what the Scriptures mean, especially in sort of short sections like Hosea, 1 John, other short epistles, and then you can delve into really deep, big studies, huge studies, and that's going to be great. You can all do it, and it starts right now. The reason they are destroyed for a lack of knowledge is because you have rejected knowledge. The knowledge is there. We have more access to knowledge than anybody at any point in human history. The only reason you will not have knowledge is because you have rejected it. It's there. Just use it. But we need to listen to who God is being condemning to here. I reject you from being a priest to me. He is still talking to the priests. He's still talking to the people that had the duty of teaching other people the law. I reject you from being a priest to me, and since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. Now listen to this. The more they increased, the more they sinned against me. I will change their glory to shame. It seems like in life that we're always busy, right? Are you busy right now? Yeah? Are you going to be busy when school starts back up? Even busier, right? Well, let me tell you, whenever you get older, you're like, it'll slow down one of these days. And then you have kids, right? And that is a wrecking ball to any time management strategy that you had in place already. And then, if you have kids that get into doing stuff, you're going to be constantly running forever, it seems like. And then you're like, okay, if we can just get the kids out of the house, life will slow down. Well, you can talk to any of the grandparents out here. Life doesn't slow down necessarily. Whenever your kids get out of the house, you are always constantly going. Life is always going to be busy. And in our culture, we are fat. Not physically necessarily, but we are fat in the sense that we have everything in abundance. If we are hungry, we can run up to Dollar General and get whatever we want to eat, that they have there at least. We can run up to Walmart, we can go to fast food. If we want to be comfortable, we can go inside the air conditioning. We are just fat. We have become very, very accustomed to a life of luxury compared to everybody else in the world. The more they increase, the more they sin against me. And that's how it tends to go in our lives. The more stuff you have, the more comfortable you are, the less you depend or need God, the less you depend on God. I will change their glory to shame. Everything we have that we are happy with, everything that we work so hard to get in this life, it's not going to be worth it in the end. Listen to verse 8. They feed on the sin of my people. They are greedy for their iniquity, and it shall be like people, like priests. I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. Here we're going to park it for a second. God's contention is with the priests. And later, in a different chapter, it's also with the leadership. Kings and princes. We're not going to get there today by any stretch of the imagination. But with leadership, kings and princes, the king enjoyed the people sinning. The priests were not just, they'll get over sinning, you know. They weren't just turning a blind eye to the people sinning. They were the sources of some of that sin. They were encouraging that sin and breeding that sin in the people. So what happens whenever the priests and the leadership go bad?
Something gets worse.
Okay, how?
By their encouragement. So by them encouraging their people to sin and not and not only just turning a blind eye to it, but encouraging it.
Okay. So whenever the leadership, here we have physical leadership and spiritual leadership. Whenever it goes bad, the people follow suit. How are elders described? What are some other names for elders in the New Testament? Bishops, presbyters? That's where I'm going. Shepherd. They're described as shepherds, and I can't think of a better term to describe what an elder does than shepherd. What does a shepherd do? By the very definition of the word, what does a shepherd do?
Herds.
Okay, he herds
Animals.
sheep, goats, whatever, cows, I guess. If you wanted to not ride a horse with a hat, you could be a shepherd of cows. But let's say sheep for a second. A shepherd herds sheep. Whenever a shepherd wants the herd to go do something, the herd will follow whatever the shepherd tells them to do. By and large, the church is the same way. There is always going to be an outlier. There's always going to be someone that puts up a fight where a fight should be put up. But if an eldership goes bad, then the church almost always is going to follow suit. Case in point. All right, case in point. I was doing some reading a few years back, and there was a guy who wrote an article. He was an elder down in Louisiana, I believe, and they had a long, drawn-out discussion on instrumental music. Should we bring instrumental music into the church? He said that the eldership studied for like 3 years altogether. They prayed long and hard about it, and in the end, they just didn't see anything wrong with it. Well, if you see an eldership that is starting to hedge on doctrine, hedge on things that you know are clearly taught in the Bible, do you think the congregation is going to put up a fight whenever they say, let's bring in instrumental music? The vast majority of the time they won't. You might lose a few members here, a few families here and there, but by and large, everybody will just roll with it. If the elders say it's okay, then it's got to be okay because they are our leaders. It's their job to make sure that we do what is right. So they just pass it off and say, well, we'll do it because the elder said it's okay. By and large, that's what most congregations do. I cannot stress enough, having scriptural leadership in the church. Strong, doctrinally sound elders. Because if you have strong, doctrinally sound, qualified elders, then you have the leaders that God wants you to have in the church. They will not do what these priests did and sin against God, lead the people into sin, abandon the knowledge of God, and just reject it completely. If you put bad leadership in place in a congregation, getting them out is about 10 times harder than putting them in. So if you put an elder in place that should not have ever been there in the first place, then you are setting yourself up for failure. Now I'm going to tell you guys this. We are in a small congregation. Small congregations struggle to keep elderships. Just by their very nature, there's not as many men to draw out of the pool of. But no matter how big or small a congregation is, if you don't have men qualified to be elders, putting men in place that are not qualified is the worst thing in the world you could do. Because they will damage the church beyond repair most of the time. And whenever you see that you've made a mistake, it's almost always too late. Do not put men into place just because you want to have elders and say, well, those qualifications, this person doesn't really meet this one, so we'll go ahead and put them in anyway. Do not do that, ever. If you see that being done, throw a red flag, okay? People might not listen to you, but you need to throw a red flag there and say, this is wrong. We cannot put in men in the hopes they will someday be qualified, because that's not how God said to do it. So, let's keep going. They shall eat and not be satisfied. They shall play the whore but not multiply, because they have forsaken the Lord to cherish whoredom, wine, and new wine, which take away understanding. Really quickly. They shall eat and not be satisfied. Have you ever been hungry? You just keep eating stuff and you stay hungry? Like all the time for me, because I'm hungry all the time. It's frustrating, right? There's just no filling to what you eat, especially if you're eating like empty calories. It doesn't fill you up the way that it should. Sin is the same way, okay? Whether or not God is punishing you immediately, sin is the same way. It is empty calories. It is something that you will try to eat, but you won't be satisfied. All right, whenever they play the whore, they won't multiply. Okay, even though they're being sexually active here, they're not going to multiply, figuratively. Because they've forsaken the Lord to cherish whoredom, wine, and new wine, which take away the understanding. We need to take a second here and park it and talk about alcohol briefly. Whenever it's talking about whoredom, wine, and new wine, they all take away understanding. Have you ever seen people that are smarter than the actions that they do, but they're so blinded by sexual sin that they abandon reason? You ever seen or know of somebody that they know that something is wrong, but they're so blinded by a desire for sexual sin that they just abandon reason and do stupid things? I can think of some people off the top of my head that have done that. So whenever you see whoredom listed in here with alcohol, it takes away understanding. People are so blinded by their passion that they abandon their reasoning. But wine and new wine here, which take away the understanding. The alcohol takes away your knowledge. Have you ever seen somebody drink alcohol and be smarter at the end of it? No, I've seen a lot of people, back when I worked at the hospital especially, I've seen a lot of people do really stupid stuff whenever they were under the influence of alcohol. I've never seen anybody smarter for it. You are never going to be closer to God at the end of an alcoholic beverage, ever. Ever. It will always move you further away from sober thinking and godly thinking. All right, verse 12. My people inquire of a piece of wood, and their walking staff gives them oracles. All right, the walking staff giving them oracles thing, they used what's called a diviner's rod. Imagine I had a decent sized stick here. It's like a walking stick. And you'd say, all right, I need an answer, and you drop it, and it's like a magic 8-ball. Depending on what way it's pointing at the end of the drop, it will give you an answer or an oracle. So if you say, I'm hungry, should we go to Branson or Nixa to eat? Nixa it is, because it's pointing that way. There you go. That's what they were doing. They inquire of a piece of wood. Wood was a cheap substance that they could carve idols out of. And so they are taking what God gave them, and they are making idols and doing silly stuff, seeking answers from silly stuff whenever God is the one they should have been seeking answers from. For a spirit of whoredom has led them astray, and they have left God to play the whore. They sacrifice on tops of mountains and burn offerings on the hills under oak, poplar, and terebinth, because their shade is good. There your daughters play the whore, and your brides commit adultery. All right, they were going into the high places under these trees because they had clear cut all of the big trees. Wood was not extremely dense. Forests were not extremely dense with big mature trees in this location. See, if we were why would they go out of their way to a shade tree? Because we could throw a rock from this room with the windows open and hit 3 big maple trees out here that are shade trees, right? I can go out on my place and there is almost nothing but shade trees all over the place. Not huge ones, but some pretty good sized shade trees. These were rare, okay? Whenever you think about a big shade tree, it's hot in Palestine, especially during the summer. It's hot. Whenever it's hot and you find shade, that shade is so valuable for a split second. That shade is great. And so these people were going out of their way to worship God or worship their gods in comfort. And we need to take a second and think about that for us today. Should our main concern whenever we worship God be our comfort? Okay, that seems like something where you go, well, no, that's just common sense. But think about it. If the air conditioning broke and it was 100 degrees in this building where we normally come together, would everybody still show up? Boy, that's quick. You would hope so, right? You would hope so. But in our day and time, comfort has become very, very important to us. All right, real quickly, their daughters play the whore and their brides commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they play the whore, nor the brides when they commit adultery, for the men themselves go aside with prostitutes and sacrifice with cult prostitutes. The people here there is no one that's the exception to this rule here. All right? God's not going to punish the daughter and the wife that are doing horrible things when the husband is doing horrible things as well. And if you think about it, if you guys ever have daughters, imagine what it's like to realize that your daughter is a prostitute, a literal prostitute. That would be a horrible thing. Imagine what it's like whenever you realize that your wife is a prostitute. It's terrible, right? But at the same time, the husband is guilty of sleeping with other prostitutes. So everybody here is guilty of sin and going aside. And the very end of this passage, and a people without understanding shall come to ruin. If you don't know what to do, you're hopeless, right? You're hopeless if you don't know what to do. In order for you to obey the gospel, what is the first thing you have to do? In order for you today to obey the gospel, what is the first thing you have to do?
Learn.
Okay, you have to have a knowledge of it, right? Most of the time that comes through hearing. We can read it today, but you have to have a knowledge of that gospel. There's no way for you to be saved if you don't know what to do. The same way, we need to keep that in the back of our minds in every aspect of our spiritual lives. If we don't know what to do, we're going to do the wrong thing. So we need to make sure that we are not a people without understanding. Also, I know I'm keeping you guys a couple minutes late, but also, we need to be working on becoming teachers, right? Is anybody in here like, man, someday, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to teach other people about the Bible. It might seem like a long shot from where you're sitting today, but you need to be working toward that goal. In Hebrews 5, and I think it's verse 27, Paul says, some of you should have already been teachers, but you still need milk. You're still babies. You're still spiritual babies because you haven't been working to get to the point where you have the knowledge to teach other people. And if you guys, this age group right here, doesn't start to get to the point where you are working toward becoming teachers, there's going to be nobody being taught down the road. And we're not just talking about Bible classes here either, although that's important, and I love Bible classes and Bible class teachers, but that's not the most important thing. We need to have people capable of teaching other people about Jesus, about the church, about how to be saved. That is more important even than the Bible classes that we're in right now. We need to be working to be capable of teaching other people in every aspect. And that starts with you guys right now. Does anybody have any questions?
I kind of do.
Okay.
So, I know, like, the Bible says, like, that basically that men are kind of like the head of the house.
Yes.
And that they're supposed to be the spiritual leaders of the household. So, how do women play, like, are we allowed to be teaching other people about Jesus, and how do you do that? Like,
Okay.
as a people?
In Acts 18, let me make sure I'm right. All right, 19, sorry, 19. All right, Apollos was at Corinth, and he didn't know there was a Holy Spirit. There we go. All right, it is 18. 18:24. Apollos, born into Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, being fervent in spirit. He spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, though he knew only the baptism of John. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. And when Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. Aquila and Priscilla were a husband and a wife, so they tag team teaching Apollos. Women are not allowed to publicly teach in an authoritative role in the church, but they are encouraged to teach others outside, especially tag teaming. I can't tell you how valuable Elizabeth is in helping me teach other people, especially women. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we can still not minister in an authority role here, but you can still talk to people about
Yes.
Christ.
Yes. Some people take some passages from Paul and twist them to the point where they essentially stitch shut women's mouths. I don't find that to be accurate at all. Some people will even have it to the point where if a boy, let's say I'm Devin's mom, and Devin becomes a Christian and is 13 years old, and he has a question about the Bible, they say that the mom can't tell him anything about what his question is. She has to take him to his dad. And if she doesn't have his dad, if the dad died in a horrible accident, she has to point him to somebody else. So she can't teach him anything from the point he becomes a Christian. I find that to be ludicrous, absolutely insane. Does anybody have any other questions? All right, thanks guys.
Now then, how do you stop this thing?